All right, so I hate looking at myself talk. I hate hearing myself talk, but we're gonna jump right into this. So I am doing my oral presentation to close out PSA 320 with one of the best instructors that I've had um, in all of my college career, I would say, Dr. V. So shout out to you, Dr. V. Um, So I'm going to be talking about issues that affect. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm going to be talking about the most current issues that are affecting my organization as it pertains to human capital management. Um, Try to do this as efficiently as possible. Uh, Using bullet points, and then I'll kind of chime in on certain things. So, the task was to interview someone and then build my synopsis on what I gathered from them and from the lesson. So, for me, the most significant human capital management issue impacting my organization is employee wellness and burnout. Burnout is the biggest one, which are closely tied to staffing shortages and workload demands. Burnout affects decision making, ethical behavior, communication quality, and employee interaction with the public, which connects directly to transparency and credibility, um, as I discussed in my essay from uh, lesson 8 here. So, just an overview of the interview itself. I interviewed a supervisory manager who was responsible for staffing and performance of employees. Um, Questions focused on causes of burnout, impacts on performance and communication, use of wellness resources, leadership responsibilities, and long term solutions. So I'm not going to drag out the video by going into super detail, but I did want to just kind of go over some of the questions that I asked, and then we'll jump into like some of the key points. So, question number one: what do you see as the biggest contributors to employee burnout? Question number two: how do staffing shortages impact employee wellness and morale? Question three: in what ways does burnout affect performance, decision making, or ethical behavior? Question four: how does burnout influence communication with the public or stakeholders? Question five: what wellness resources are currently available and how often are they actually used? Question six: do you believe there is still stigma around mental health or burnout among employees? Question seven: how does leadership identify early signs of burnout before it becomes a serious issue? Question eight: what role should frontline employees play in addressing burnout within the organization? Question nine: what barriers prevent leadership from addressing burnout more effectively? Question 10: what long term changes do you believe are necessary to reduce burnout and improve retention? Okay, so out of all of that, and all of the dialogue that we had, the key responses were these four that I'm going to give you now. The first one: so it appears that staffing shortages and mandatory overtime were identified as the main drivers for burnout, which is totally understandable. Um, Second point was that burnout leads to reduced focus, lower morale, and inconsistent communication. The third point was that wellness programs exist, but they are often underused due to time restraints and stigmas. And the fourth major point that I drew from the interview was that leadership and organizational culture play the biggest role in addressing burnout. So, what surprised me was that the manager actually openly acknowledged burnout as an organizational issue rather than how a lot of people would tend to look at it as um, an individual weakness or a personal problem. And then also, what I learned during this interview was that addressing burnout requires leadership accountability, realistic workloads, and honest communication. And then the second point was that I learned that employee wellness is directly connected to ethical behavior, transparency, and long-term organizational effectiveness. So I'm just going off the cuff here. With me being in the military and being prior law enforcement, I can tell you that wellness and burnout are two of the biggest things that you will run into. Um, First and foremost, a lot of people can't prioritize, right? So in fields where you have like a huge workload, you have to learn to low key be your own manager. You have to be able to manage your time and be able to prioritize. Um, or if you get real good at it, you can start delegating. But that's another topic for another time. Um, but yeah, burnout is huge because once a person starts to experience that, like you literally have to just remove them completely from the environment. That's the only way it's gonna stop. Because you just get tired of seeing the same thing day in and day out, tired of doing the same thing day in and day out. Even if it's something that you love, like it can become just draining, especially when you don't have the support of leadership and your chain of command and whatnot. And that's why I was impressed um, by the manager openly acknowledging that burnout was an organizational issue and not just an individual weakness. I think that's huge, and I honestly think that if a lot of companies would look at it from that standpoint, you could reduce your turnover rates. Um, you could boost morale within your organization, and um, you would honestly build a better culture because the culture and stigmas affect a lot of different areas. So, for example, and I'll end with this. For example, in the military, there was a stigma that if you went to sick call for injuries or something, that you could possibly just shake off or whatever, that you were soft or you weren't as tough or you weren't um, as good of a soldier as other people were. But then later on, you have veterans getting out who are disabled and should have been documenting all of those things. So now you got to turn around and fight the VA on the back end when you could have simply just went ahead and went to sick call. It didn't change, that how you were affected until it got to issues with like promotion and stuff like that. Then people, oh, well, this person's always hurt or they're always sick or they're always this, they're always that. That was the old stigma of the old culture of how the army was. Now they're getting away from that because you have soldiers getting hurt and then they're getting out sooner. And now you got to ramp up recruitment because you're losing people. So it transfers to the civilian side as well, especially with like law enforcement and things like that. In order to do a good job, you got to be healthy physically and mentally. and you can't burn out your employees. All right. Have a good one.